The complex legacy of slavery as the fatal flaw in American race relations is given a remarkably nuanced and unsentimental treatment in Charles W. Chesnutt's short story The Sheriff's Children, from his 1899 collection The Wife of His Youth and Other Stories of the Color Line. Chesnutt approaches the thorny subject of miscegenation that lies at the core of the story from the perspective of someone whose racial compass was informed by his own physical appearance as well as his experience of geographical and socio-cultural mobility. He was a mixed-race, light-skinned African-American with Caucasian features. His white grandfather was an affluent tobacco merchant who grew up in, and later relocated to, the northern black middle class of Cleveland, Ohio, and after the Civil War moved with his family to Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he had a successful career as a school teacher and principal. In the early 1880s he also lived in New York City, where he began working as a court reporter and stenographer, and later he studied law and passed the Ohio bar exam. The Sheriff's Children was a significant departure from the folk tales of Chesnutt's first story collection, The Conjure Woman, 1899, and constitutes his first representation of the mulatto as a sympathetic tragic protagonist on his own terms, meaning his tragic fate does not ensue from a desire to pass, like in stereotypical portrayals of late 19th century popular white fiction. It was also a reaction against the virulent racism and white supremacism of the New South, which anticipated the protest fiction that Chesnutt would go on to write, and that would foreclose his literary career. The Sheriff's Children is set in the small town of Troy in rural, post-Civil War Branson County, North Carolina, where the widely liked Captain Walker has been murdered, and the townspeople waste no time in blaming a mulatto who was seen near the captain's house the previous night. The investigation is led by Sheriff Campbell, an affluent, well-respected Confederate war hero. Campbell gathers a posse to capture the suspect, and locks him up in attendance of a trial. When word reaches the sheriff that the locals have decided to take justice in their own hands and lynch the prisoner, he heads to the jail to protect the man, leaving a pistol with his daughter Polly in case anyone were to try and harass her. The sheriff prevents the lynch mob from getting to the prisoner, agreeing with them that the man will probably be found guilty of the murder and hanged, but nonetheless determined to keep them from doing him any harm. Before the mob reluctantly turns away, the sheriff unshackles the prisoner and tells him to fight for his life in case they manage to force their way in. The prisoner pleads his innocence and implores the sheriff to protect him, stealing his revolver in the process. He asserts that he is not guilty, but knows he cannot prove it, and is convinced an all-white jury will condemn him to death, so he plans to escape and kill the sheriff to secure his getaway. When the sheriff expresses shock that the prisoner would kill the person who saved his life, the man reveals himself to be Tom, son of Cicely, who was one of the sheriff's plantation slaves before the war, and goes on to disclose that he is the illegitimate son of the sheriff. The latter sold him down south to Alabama, along with his mother, who ended up lashed to death because she had enough womanhood to call her soul her own. The sheriff has often regretted his course of action, which was driven by anger and financial concern. He blurts out that surely Tom wouldn't kill his own father, to which the son retorts by questioning how Campbell has shown himself to be any sort of proper father. Tom decides to kill the sheriff, but as he points the gun, he is shot in the back by Polly, who came to check up on her father. The sheriff tends to Tom's wound, which is not fatal, and leaves him in his cell. When he returns the following morning, he finds that his son has ripped the bandages off and bled to death. Tom's suicide should not be read as enabling Campbell's redemption, but rather as ironically preempting it. The sheriff contemplates how he can make amends and finally do right by his son, even find a way to exculpate him from a crime he is de facto supposed to have committed, but all this is privileged rationalization on the part of the white father, at a point where he has just abandoned his son for the second time. There is nothing sacrificial about Tom's death. He has come home to die in silence and solitude, in an Oedipal tragedy that reunites him with his mother, while his father is left to carry the former slave master's burden of guilt. The fact that Polly is the one who fires at Tom puts an extremely bleak spin on the story's denouement. Rather than the potential of reconciliation or healing among a younger generation, Chesnutt opts for showing a complete disconnect, where the young white woman protects her father by shooting the young black man, unaware the latter is her half-brother. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.